The rain fell in heavy sheets across the empty gas station as Victoria knelt on the wet pavement, her white dress soaked through, her hand reaching out toward the taillights that were already disappearing into the storm. At 8 months pregnant, she struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Her husband of 3 years, millionaire businessman Richard Hayes, had driven away, leaving her stranded 60 miles from the nearest town. "This cannot be happening," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. The baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her distress, and Victoria placed both hands protectively over her swollen belly. The argument had started that morning over something so trivial she could barely remember it now. Richard had been distant for weeks, taking mysterious phone calls and working late every night. When she had asked him about their plans for the baby's nursery, he had exploded with a fury that seemed to come from nowhere. "I never wanted this," he had shouted, gesturing at her pregnant form. "I never wanted any of this responsibility. I was 25 when I built my company from nothing, and I was free. Now I feel trapped." Victoria had tried to reason with him, to remind him of the joy they had shared when they first learned about the baby. But Richard's eyes had grown cold in a way she had never seen before. He had insisted they take a drive to talk things through, and she had trusted him enough to get in the car. Now, as she knelt in the rain at this desolate gas station, Victoria realized that the man she had married was not the man she thought she knew. The Richard she had fallen in love with had been kind and generous, someone who spoke about family and building a life together. This version of her husband was a stranger who could abandon a pregnant woman in the middle of a storm. Car door slammed behind her, and Victoria turned to see a man in a dark suit approaching. He was perhaps 40 years old, with concern etched across his weathered features. Unlike Richard's polished appearance, this man had the bearing of someone who had worked for everything he had. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but urgent. "You should not be out in this weather, especially in your condition." Victoria tried to stand, but her legs felt unsteady. The stranger immediately moved to help her, offering his arm for support without hesitation. "My husband," she began, then stopped, the reality of her situation hitting her fully. "My husband left me here," the man's expression darkened. "He left you in this storm while you are pregnant?" Victoria nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "I do not understand why. We had an argument, but I never thought he would actually abandon me." "My name is James Mitchell," the man said, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it around her shoulders. "And no matter what happened between you and your husband, leaving you here was inexcusable. Let me get you somewhere warm and dry." As James helped her toward his modest sedan, Victoria noticed the genuine kindness in his eyes. There was something solid and dependable about him that reminded her of her father, a man who had taught her that true strength lay in protecting those who needed help, not in walking away from responsibility. "Where were you headed?" James asked as they settled into his car with the heater running. "I honestly do not know," Victoria admitted. "Richard said we were going to the coast to talk, but I suspect now that he was planning to leave me somewhere, far from home all along." James was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "The coast is still another hour's drive. There is a small inn about 20 minutes from here where you can rest and get warm. We can figure out the next steps from there." As they drove through the storm, Victoria found herself talking to this stranger in a way she had not talked to anyone in months. James listened without judgment as she explained how her marriage had slowly deteriorated, how Richard had become increasingly resentful of the pregnancy, and how isolated she had felt as his behavior grew colder. "I kept thinking that once the baby came, he would remember why we wanted to start a family," she said softly. "I thought his love for our child would bring back the man I married." James glanced at her with compassion. "Some people run from responsibility because they are afraid of not being good enough. Others run because they never wanted the responsibility in the first place. It sounds like your husband may be the latter. The inn was a small, family-run establishment with warm lighting and the smell of fresh coffee. The elderly proprietor, Mrs. Chen, took one look at Victoria's condition and immediately insisted on preparing their best room. As James helped Victoria settle in, she realized that this stranger had shown her more care and consideration in 1 hour than her husband had in months. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria asked as James prepared to leave. "You do not even know me." James paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. "My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 7. I watched her struggle to provide for us, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar situation, I would not hesitate." Over the next 3 days, as Victoria waited for her sister to drive down from the city, James visited daily. He brought books, comfortable clothes, and most importantly, conversation that reminded Victoria of her own worth. Unlike Richard, who had made her feel like a burden, James made her feel heard and valued. On the third evening, as they sat in the inn's small garden watching the sunset, Victoria felt the baby kick particularly strongly. Without thinking, she reached for James's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that," she said with wonder. "The baby seems to like your voice." James's face lit up with genuine amazement as he felt the movement. "That is incredible. What a strong little one." "I have been thinking," Victoria said carefully. "When I get back to the city, I am going to file for divorce. I cannot raise this child with someone who sees us both as obstacles to his happiness." James nodded supportively. "You deserve someone who will cherish both you and your baby, not someone who abandons you when life gets challenging." As Victoria's sister arrived to take her home, she realized that Richard's cruelty had inadvertently been a gift. It had removed the illusion of their marriage and introduced her to someone who understood what commitment really meant. 6 months later, as Victoria held her healthy baby daughter, she received a letter from James. He had started a foundation to help single mothers in crisis, inspired by their meeting. The letter ended with a simple question: would she like to have coffee sometime and meet the little girl who had brought them together? Sometimes, Victoria reflected, the worst moments in our lives clear the path for the best ones to follow. Richard had shown her what love was not. James had shown her what it could be.